Okay, so let me start off by saying this was not supposed to be the video for today. I don't think I ever had the intention of making this video, but as fate would have it, here we are. So today's video was originally going to be based on my impressions from the Marvel Avengers video game in its recent open beta, but after playing some of it on stream, I realised that I just could not find the energy to put myself through playing it for 10 more minutes in order to gain enough footage for the video in question. So I put myself through that. It got me thinking, how could they have done it better? And add to that question with the recent reveals of Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad, it drew me back to one of my favourite games, Batman Arkham Asylum. So that also begs the question, what makes Arkham Asylum so good? The story is pretty straightforward for Arkham Asylum, It all takes place in the setting of the titular Arkham Asylum. It's centered around Batman and an assortment of his supporting characters, including both villains and allies. But, after the Joker assaults Gotham City Hall, he's caught by Batman and taken to Arkham Asylum, which is temporarily housing many members of Joker's gang, who were transferred after a fire at Blackgate Prison. Believing that Joker allowed himself to be captured, Batman accompanies him to the asylum. Joker's plans then revealed as Harley Quinn takes control of security, and Joker escapes into the facility, aided by a corrupt guard who kidnaps Commissioner Gordon. The Joker then threatens to detonate bombs hidden around Gotham City if anyone tries to enter Arkham. This forces Batman to work alone. Now, during his task to defeat the Joker, Batman faces a few villains of his infamous Rogues Gallery. This includes an enraged Bane, serial killer Victor Zsasz, the monstrous Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, and you even battle your way through hallucinogen-induced nightmares created by the Scarecrow. Now, the thing that makes it special in Arkham Asylum is that, well, all the Arkham games, in fact, besides Arkham Origins, but we don't talk about that here. Most of the characters are voiced by people that have portrayed them in other Batman media, Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, and Arlene Sorkin all reprise their roles as Batman, Joker, Harley Quinn from the DC animated universe. But the standout with Arkham Asylum is how it tells a linear story when compared to other superhero games. And you can actually believe when playing this game that it is the longest night of Batman's life. It doesn't really become as believable in Arkham City and Arkham Knight, with the trailing side missions and everything. The story is the main event of the game though, with the excellent performances by the voice cast, with the Joker being as sadistic as ever been, just casually murdering guards and doctors because it amuses him.
Tell me something. You've never let me catch you this easily. What are you really after?
Oh, nothing much. Hundreds dying in pain and fear. All their meaningless lives brought to a horrifying conclusion. All thanks to you and a book of matches. Was that the answer you wanted?
Then you've got Victor Zsasz, who's a horrifyingly disturbed murderer whose appearance isn't quite that noteworthy. You just sneak up behind him and take him down. That's it. But for him, his standouts are his patient tapes. These are scattered throughout the asylum, with a story for each major inmate being told over a sequence of 5 tapes. In Zaz's tapes, his infatuation with his female psychiatrist is chilling. They also add a lot to the supporting characters in the game, each given their own time to shine if you listen to them. They add a lot of nuances to the characters, and this also allows for some character backgrounds for some people that might not be too familiar with them. There's also the aspect of the game over screens, with most of the villains having their own screen with unique dialogue relating to Batman. The game does have quite a dark tone, but it's at least balanced by the occasional injection of humour, either from Joker or from one of the other supporting cast members. This provides another example of why Arkham Asylum has earned its classic status. Now, the gameplay from Arkham Asylum is one of the bigger positives to come from it. The free-flow combat, as Rocksteady called it, allowed for the combat to feel as brutal as it should, with Batman's punches, kicks and takedowns feeling they're actually being executed with ferocity and power. The free-flow combat is based around the counter system in the game, which focuses on you unleashing a flurry of light punches and kicks, moving quickly between targets and utilising Batman's ability to block and counter oncoming attacks, meaning that could easily go through an entire wave of enemies without taking a single hit. Now, this is a system that's gone on to be included in many other games outside the Arkham series, like Spider-Man, Mad Max, and Shadow of Mordor. But not a lot of them can actually match what made Rocksteady's system so special in the first place, and what they themselves have even gone on to refine and improve in the sequels to Arkham Asylum. One thing that did surprise me when I first played Arkham Asylum a decade ago was the alternative approach to combat with stealth sections which focused on the game's Predator mode. This allowed you to take down a full room of bad guys from the shadows of the asylum, simply swooping from gargoyle to gargoyle, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Forces players to use a bit of strategy, like taking pawns out on the chessboard. Adds a bit of complexity to the gameplay. Sometimes there are hostages that will be executed if Batman is seen. This means a flawless sweep of the area is required. Then in later sections of the game, prisoners start to wear collars which alert others of their consciousness. This can also be used to your advantage with real-time batarang or takedown. Now, Batman will not be seen dead without his gadget belt, and luckily Arkham Asylum provides him with a wide array of his tools, to include all of his batarangs, explosive gel, Batclaw, cryptographic sequencer, and his line launcher. All of these are used due to the game's Metroidvania-like style approach to how you navigate the asylum, with instances of backtracking when you gain a new gadget, such as when you get the line launcher. That allows you to access an area that was previously unavailable due to electrified water. There's also the game's detective vision in the game that highlights the Batman's greatest tool, his mind. After all, he's meant to be the world's greatest detective. This transforms the game screen into a high-tech version of the game, in which Batman can see through certain environments, seek out clues for story progression or Riddler trophies, but more on them later. Detective mode does run a double-edged sword though. It follows the canon of Batman and works as a gameplay tool to give the players the planning required for stealth combat. It does run the risk though of the issue of let's just always keep it on. And this over-reliance can take away from the fantastic art direction and level design. Now with any action game there are boss fights, and in Arkham Asylum, the boss fights are plenty favourable.
I'm sorry, Jim.
The biggest and best being scarecrows. During these encounters, Batman is under the influence of Scarecrow's fear toxin, and it was in these sections that Rocksteady once again demonstrated its affection for DC's universe, delving into the psyche of Orphan Bruce as he ventured through the metaphoric hellscape. You guide Batman in the attempt to dodge the oversized Scarecrow's searchlight, playing cat and mouse until you reach the top. Forced stealth sections like this usually go down like a lead balloon in most games, while Arkham Asylum used it as a reason to add to the lore in a cool way. There is a negative to this, however, how these Scarecrow sections have kind of influenced modern games since it's Arkham Asylum's original release. Most games nowadays feel the need to incorporate some trippy drug sequence into them. I'm getting pretty sick and tired of them, to be honest, because none of them really match up to Scarecrow. Small diversion over, back to the boss fights. Some of the other standouts for me in Arkham Asylum are the Killer Croc section and Poison Ivy boss fight. These allow for unique strategy when completing them, especially when compared to some of the so-called boss fights involving Harley Quinn and Victor Zsasz, where simple takedown is all you need. Perhaps the most controversial boss fight in the game though is the climactic boss fight with the Joker, who, after injecting himself with Titan Toxin, transforms into this massive behemoth version of himself. This to me is a bit disappointing because of such a deeply engaging story that brought to life some of my favourite aspects of the Batman mythos. It was really disappointing to find out that the final battle featured the big baddie basically just transforming into a roid-raging version of himself. I didn't really feel like it fit in with the game and its narrative. It was also disappointing from a gameplay perspective as well, because you just repeat the same cycle of events until the fight's concluded. There is a positive aspect as the fight is, it has its place in the story factor in both sequels, and this adds a uniqueness to the Arkham Joker even more. Now, one of the most infamous members of Batman's Rogue Gallery is the Riddler, and he definitely gets his time to shine in Arkham Asylum. The premise is that the Riddler hacks into Batman's communications from his hidden lair. From here, he challenges Batman to solve all of his riddles and retrieve the Riddler trophies he had scattered throughout the island. Riddler trophies are marked on the map if Batman connects enough of the Riddler maps. After solving and retrieving all the riddles and Riddler trophies respectively, Batman then uses Riddler's use of his communication system to trace his location to a local church in Gotham, which he then forwards to the GCPD, and whilst Batman listens over his comms, GCPD breaks into Riddler's hideout and incapacitates the Riddler. I personally really enjoyed the Riddler trophies. It was one of the first times in the game that I wanted to collect everything. I wanted to see how the Riddler's narrative played out. But this was something that I feel was overdone in the sequels, especially in Arkham City. There's over 400 trophies, compared to the 240 in Arkham Asylum. All of the characters are performed with absolute perfection, especially Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, or rarely a new element as Caped Crusader and the Clown Prince of Crime. But one character that does tend to go unsung in this game is the Asylum itself. It's when Batman arrives in the area called Arkham East that the scale of the setting becomes clear. This large open hub area is among the most impressive looking parts of the game. Illuminated by an oversized glowing moon and dominated by the spires of the Arkham Mansion, the grand old house that the Asylum was built around, and it really lends itself to the effectively grim and atmospheric setting of the game. On the horizon of Arkham Asylum, you can see the skyline of Gotham, giving you a sense of just how isolated Arkham Island is from the rest of the city. You do have some freedom here to grapple and glide around, something that would be a major part of the sequels when exploring both Arkham and Gotham cities, and this is where you feel the most like Batman. For the most part, this game does take place indoors, but the imaginative, exaggerated architecture of the interiors means it never feels claustrophobic or repetitive. You even get to visit a Batcave which Batman had built under the island in case of the need ever arose. Each of the different areas in the game have their own unique feel to them, from the botanical gardens, which becomes Poison Ivy's headquarters, to the penitentiary where the most dangerous patients are kept. It's here where you'll find clues on who occupied the cells before the breakout occurs, such as Two-Face, Riddler, and even Mr. Freeze. The asylum over time will change as the night goes on, as you see the place being vandalised, statues of the Warden are defaced, signs are hung up welcoming Batman to the Joker Asylum, and after encountering Poison Ivy, her plants burst out of the ground and wrap their tendrils around the various parts of the asylum. This gives it a sensation of time passing and creates the illusion that stuff is still happening on the island, even when Batman isn't there. There are even smaller details on Batman himself, as his pristine suit at the beginning of the game becomes damaged and teared by the final encounter. This really helps with the flow of the game and makes the asylum feel really alive, so to speak. It is one of the most integral reasons for the game being as great as it is. This is something that does not really get replicated in newer games besides some smoke on the city rooftops. There are very few flaws in Batman Arkham Asylum, and I think this is why it stands the test of time. It's a classic story of Batman vs. Joker, but this retelling is kept fresh by the setting and tone of the game's environment and newer characters and their interactions with the Dark Knight. Arkham Asylum takes something familiar as Batman and makes it feel brand new. I'd like to see more developers take this approach to the existing mythologies around licensed characters. Instead of making everything open world, pick one location, laser focus on it. Use it as a way to see the particular world through a different lens. Batman Arkham Asylum marked a notable shift in how the video game world thought of superhero games, proving that licensed release is no longer to be seen as something to roll your eyes at, but something that does actually deserve your attention. As long as these characters and their stories are given the proper attention by a passionate developer that cares about the intellectual property, the potential is unlimited. Not something that I think Square Enix have already done with the Avengers game. Rocksteady really did exceed expectations in its handling of Batman Arkham Asylum and the future iterations, but there's still something special about visiting the asylum and, as the game tagline goes, being the Batman.